6:03 a.m. The bus started its route, pulling out from the downtown terminal. Michael Harris drove in silence, as he always did during the early hours. The first passengers trickled in, exchanging greetings and settling into their regular seats. At 6:19 a.m., the usual group of Southern Trust Bank employees boarded at the Fifth Avenue stop. Michael recognized their faces and their voices. For years, these passengers had been part of his daily routine. Over time, their conversations became predictable. Today was no exception. Two men sat near the front, talking about vault maintenance scheduled for later in the week. Their words caught Michael's attention. Without showing any visible reaction, he noted the frustration in their tone and the detail in their words. By 6:41 a.m., the bus reached the Southern Trust Bank building. The employees exited through the side doors, one by one swiping their key cards and entering in pairs. Michael lingered longer than necessary, watching how efficiently they moved through the security system. He noticed one woman pause to retrieve her card from her bag, holding up the line for a few seconds. It was a small moment, but it stayed with him. 6:04 a.m. On a quiet morning earlier in the week, Michael had noticed Sarah Lane, a frequent passenger and bank employee, as she boarded the bus. Her hands were full, balancing a coffee cup, a handbag, and a rolled-up jacket. As she moved toward her seat, something small and plastic slipped from her coat pocket onto the floor. Michael bent down to pick it up before anyone else could step on it. He held it for a moment, recognizing it as an employee key card. Without saying a word, he handed it back to her. Sarah muttered a quick thank you and tucked the card into her bag. For a split second, Michael glimpsed the words, Southern Trust Bank, Employee Access, printed on it. The card bore a magnetic stripe and a small barcode. By the time the bus reached the bank, Michael couldn't stop thinking about the incident. The card was just one piece of a larger puzzle. He began to connect it to the vault schedules, security gaps, and casual employee habits he had observed over the years. 6:11 a.m. Michael parked his bus near Southern Trust Bank, ensuring he had a clear view of the building's entrances. The bank employees arrived in waves, most of them using the side entrance. At 6:38 a.m., Sarah Lane appeared, keycard in hand. She swiped it at the door, then inserted a small key to unlock the secondary lock. The process took less than 10 seconds. Michael noted how smoothly it was executed. Minutes later, the two security guards stepped outside for their smoke break. Michael timed them carefully, observing that they consistently left their posts for 7 minutes. During this window, no one monitored the employee entrance. At 6:52 a.m., a delivery truck arrived. The driver carried several packages to the rear entrance, where a bank employee signed off on the delivery without checking the contents. The interaction was quick, almost careless. Michael watched as the driver left, and the employee carried the packages into the building. Michael spent the evening reviewing his notes. Over the years, he had unintentionally collected a wealth of information about Southern Trust Bank. Now, for the first time, he saw the potential to use it. He mapped out the daily routines he had observed, the arrival times, the security gaps, and the predictable behavior of the employees. He focused on Sarah Lane's keycard, recognizing it as a potential entry point. He also noted the delivery schedule, the unguarded entrances, and the lack of thorough checks during the morning rush. Each detail felt like a piece of a larger plan. Michael didn't act immediately. Instead, he committed himself to further observation, knowing that patience was key. 6:04 a.m. Michael began his usual route through the city. The familiar roads and regular passengers gave him a sense of comfort, but his thoughts were far from routine. He had decided to test the observations he had made over the years, focusing on the gaps in Southern Trust Bank's security. By the time he reached the bank stop, Michael had already noted several key details. Sarah Lane exited the bus at her usual time, swiping her keycard at the side entrance. He watched as the door took 7 seconds to close after her entry. It was enough time for someone close behind to slip in unnoticed. After completing his route, Michael returned to the bank area on foot. He found a spot across the street where he could observe without drawing attention. At 9:30 a.m., the two security guards stepped outside for their daily smoke break. Michael timed them with his watch, 7 minutes, long enough to create a critical vulnerability in the building's security. As Michael continued watching, he noticed a delivery truck arrive. The driver spent only a few minutes unloading packages, which were taken into the bank without inspection. The ease with which these deliveries were accepted added another layer to Michael's growing plan. By the end of the day, Michael felt confident in his observations. The routine of the bank employees, the predictable actions of the security team, and the unmonitored entrances were all pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. 9:16 a.m. Michael sat at his kitchen table, reviewing his notes from the morning. Each detail reinforced his belief that the bank's security was more vulnerable than it appeared. The idea of exploiting these weaknesses had moved from a vague notion to a concrete plan. He outlined the steps he would need to take: gain access to a key card, duplicate it, and identify the best time to enter the bank. He also considered the importance of timing his actions to align with the guard's smoke break. Every minute would count. Michael decided to test his theory that day. He left his apartment and headed to a local hardware store where he purchased a portable magnetic strip scanner. The clerk at the counter barely glanced at him as he paid in cash. Michael chose the scanner carefully, ensuring it was compact enough to fit in his jacket pocket. Back at home, Michael practiced using the scanner on old credit cards and IDs. The device worked flawlessly, capturing the magnetic data within seconds. Each successful test gave him more confidence. As the afternoon wore on, Michael planned his next move. He needed to get close to Sarah Lane without arousing suspicion. The cafe where she often spent her lunch break seemed like the perfect place. 6:07 a.m. The next morning, Michael watched as Sarah Lane boarded the bus. Her keycard, attached to a lanyard, hung loosely from her bag. Michael observed how it swung slightly with her movements, occasionally slipping out of sight. At the bank stop, Sarah exited the bus and swiped her card at the employee entrance. Michael noted the efficiency of her actions. She never hesitated, and her routine was the same every day. Later that morning, Michael positioned himself at the cafe Sarah frequented. He arrived early, choosing a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. When Sarah walked in, she placed her bag and jacket on the chair beside her. The key card, as Michael expected, slipped partially out of a side pocket. As Sarah went to the counter to collect her order, Michael acted quickly. He retrieved the key card, scanned it with his device, and returned it to the exact position within seconds. His heart raced, but his movements were controlled and deliberate. Sarah returned to her table, unaware that her card had ever left her possession. Michael finished his coffee and left the cafe, feeling a surge of confidence. The hardest part of his plan had been executed flawlessly. 10:04 a.m. At home, Michael tested the duplicate keycard on an old lock system he had salvaged from a previous job. The scanner had captured the magnetic data perfectly, and the duplicate worked without issue. Michael felt a sense of control he hadn't experienced in years. He spent hours reviewing his plan, considering every possible scenario. He identified the risks: security cameras, unexpected changes in the guard's routine, and the possibility of being seen near the bank after hours. Each risk was met with a potential solution. Michael began preparing his tools: a pair of gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, a small flashlight for navigating dark areas, and a simple black backpack to carry the money. He kept his preparations minimal, knowing that excess gear could slow him down or draw suspicion. The duplicate keycard became his most valuable asset. He practiced swiping it on various surfaces, ensuring he could use it quickly and without error. The more he practiced, the more confident he became. By nightfall, Michael was ready to take the next step. He planned to test the duplicate keycard on the bank's employee entrance the following morning. 10:18 p.m. Michael sat in the dark, staring at the keycard on his table. The gravity of his plan weighed heavily on him, but he felt a strange calm. The steps were clear, and he had prepared for every foreseeable obstacle. He considered the potential outcomes. Success would mean freedom from financial struggle, but failure could cost him everything. He had no criminal record and no experience with law enforcement, which both reassured and unnerved him. As the hours passed, Michael reviewed his notes one last time. The guard schedules, the layout of the bank, and the routines of the employees were all etched into his mind. He could visualize every step of the plan, as if it had already happened. By midnight, Michael made his decision. He would test the keycard the next morning, timing his entry to coincide with the guard's smoke break. If it worked, he would move to the final stages of his plan. 6:04 a.m. Michael Harris started his day as he always did, driving the bus along the familiar route through Mobile. His passengers, conversations, and stops were routine, yet his thoughts were far from ordinary. Today, his plan would progress to its most critical phase. As the bus filled with passengers, Michael remained calm, greeting each one with a neutral expression. When Sarah Lane boarded at 6:19 a.m., he observed her movements carefully. Her keycard hung from her bag as it did every day, occasionally swinging into view. At 6:41 a.m., Michael dropped off the bank employees, including Sarah, at Southern Trust Bank. He watched her swipe her card and enter through the employee entrance. The door remained open for precisely 7 seconds after her entry. This was the moment Michael focused on. It was just enough time for someone to follow unnoticed. Completing his route, Michael parked the bus and returned to the bank area on foot. The streets were quieter than usual. He found a discreet spot across the street where he could observe the building without attracting attention. At 9:30 a.m., the guards stepped outside for their smoke break. Michael noted their relaxed demeanor as they leaned against the wall, chatting idly. He timed their break with his watch, 7 minutes. These 7 minutes were the foundation of his plan. 9:34 a.m. Michael approached the bank's employee entrance, the duplicate keycard concealed in his pocket. His heart raced, but his steps were measured and deliberate. He reached the door, swiped the card, and waited. The light on the card reader turned green, followed by the faint click of the lock. Michael pushed the door open slowly, ensuring it made no sound, and stepped inside. The hallway was empty, just as he had anticipated. He let the door close quietly behind him. Michael moved carefully through the corridor. Security cameras were mounted at intervals, but he knew they weren't actively monitored unless an incident occurred. The buzzing of fluorescent lights overhead filled the silence. Spotting a small storage closet nearby, Michael slipped inside. The cramped space smelled of cleaning supplies. He waited there for several minutes, listening to the faint sounds of activity beyond the door. His entry had gone unnoticed. After ensuring the hallway was still clear, Michael emerged from the closet and continued exploring. His objective was to locate the vault and understand the layout of the bank's interior. 10:12 a.m. Michael found the vault room at the end of a long corridor. The steel door stood imposingly, flanked by a keypad and a manual lock. He noted the positions of the security cameras, the proximity of nearby offices, and the number of steps required to reach the vault from the employee entrance. The layout was simpler than Michael had expected. The vault was positioned near the back of the building, away from the main offices and public areas. Its isolation was a weakness Michael could exploit. He crouched in the hallway, studying the keypad. It required a 6-digit code. Michael knew from his observations that the code was likely shared among the employees and might be mentioned in their conversations. Returning to the storage closet, Michael reviewed the mental map he had created. He visualized every turn, every door, and every camera. He was building a detailed plan, step by step. 10:48 a.m. Michael waited patiently in the storage closet as the guards returned from their smoke break. Their voices echoed in the hallway, growing louder, then fading as they moved further into the bank. Michael listened intently, timing his exit to avoid crossing paths with anyone. When the hallway fell silent, Michael stepped out and retraced his steps toward the employee entrance. He swiped the keycard again, and the door unlocked without issue. He slipped outside, letting the door close gently behind him. Once on the street, Michael walked away calmly, blending into the mid-morning crowd. He resisted the urge to look back, knowing that any unusual behavior could attract attention. Returning to the bus depot, Michael parked his bus and sat in silence for a few moments. The test had been a complete success. The keycard worked perfectly, the guards remained predictable, and the layout of the bank was manageable. 8:22 p.m. That evening, Michael sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by notes and sketches. He had drawn a detailed diagram of the bank's interior, marking key locations: the employee entrance, the storage closet, and the vault. He meticulously planned every step of the heist, from entering the building to accessing the vault and exiting unnoticed. He considered potential obstacles and devised contingency plans. Michael prepared his tools: gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, a small flashlight for navigating dark areas, and a simple black backpack to carry the money. He kept his preparations minimal, knowing that excess equipment could slow him down or draw suspicion. At 10:47 p.m., Michael set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. The heist was planned for the following morning, timed to coincide with the guard's smoke break. Lying in bed, he replayed the plan in his mind, visualizing every detail. Sleep did not come easily, but Michael felt a sense of control that steadied his nerves. 4:30 a.m. The alarm buzzed in the dark room. Michael rose immediately, his movements purposeful and calm. He dressed in plain, dark clothing and double-checked his backpack to ensure everything was in place. At 5:12 a.m., Michael left his apartment, taking a different route to the bank to avoid being seen by anyone who might recognize him. The streets were quiet, the city still waking up. Reaching the bank, Michael positioned himself in a nearby alley, waiting for the right moment. The guards would begin their shift soon, and Michael's window of opportunity was approaching. The success of his plan depended on precision, and he was ready. 4:30 a.m. Michael Harris sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the alarm clock as it buzzed in the dark room. This was the moment he had been preparing for over the past weeks. His backpack, neatly packed with gloves, a flashlight, and a crowbar, waited by the door. Michael stood, his movements slow but deliberate. He pulled on a black hoodie and dark jeans, ensuring he looked as nondescript as possible. He tied his sneakers tightly and placed a plain baseball cap on his head, pulling it low to obscure his face. At 5:12 a.m., Michael left his apartment, locking the door behind him. He carried nothing that could directly link him to the heist, other than the backpack and the duplicate keycard tucked safely in his pocket. The streets were still quiet, the city barely awake. Michael walked briskly, but avoided rushing. He had planned his route carefully, choosing side streets and alleys to avoid security cameras or familiar faces. At one point, he passed a jogger but kept his head down, his cap shielding his face. By 5:43 a.m., Michael reached the alley near Southern Trust Bank. He crouched behind a dumpster, scanning the area. The early morning light was dim, casting long shadows across the street. Michael adjusted his position, ensuring he remained hidden while still having a clear view of the bank's employee entrance. 9:28 a.m. The guards exited the bank, their laughter echoing faintly in the alley as they lit their cigarettes. Michael watched them closely, counting the seconds. He knew their smoke break would last exactly 7 minutes. This window was his only chance to enter unnoticed. At 9:32 a.m., Michael moved swiftly toward the employee entrance. The keycard felt warm in his hand, a mix of adrenaline and the morning heat. He swiped it through the reader and the light turned green. The lock clicked, and Michael pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The hallway was exactly as he remembered, sterile, quiet, and empty. Michael let the door close softly behind him, taking a moment to listen for any sounds of movement. The faint hum of fluorescent lights filled the air, but there were no voices or footsteps. Michael made his way to the storage closet he had identified during his earlier reconnaissance. He opened the door and stepped inside, closing it quietly behind him. The space was cramped, filled with cleaning supplies and spare uniforms. Michael crouched in the corner, listening intently. At 9:36 a.m., the guards returned to their posts, their voices fading as they moved deeper into the building. Michael waited an additional 3 minutes, ensuring the hallway was clear before stepping out of the closet. 9:42 a.m. Michael approached the corridor leading to the vault. The air felt heavier here, the stakes rising with every step. The vault door loomed at the end of the hallway, its steel surface reflecting the faint light from overhead. Michael crouched near the keypad, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. The code he had overheard, 714263, was burned into his memory. He typed it into the keypad, his fingers steady despite the tension. The display flashed green and the lock clicked. Michael felt a rush of relief but didn't allow himself to pause. He inserted the duplicate key into the manual lock, turning it slowly. The mechanism engaged with a soft clunk, and the door began to open. Inside, the vault was just as he had imagined. Shelves lined with bundles of cash, neatly organized and secured with paper bands. Michael stepped inside, careful not to touch anything unnecessarily. 9:47 a.m. Michael assessed the stacks of cash, focusing on the $100 bills. Each bundle contained $10,000, making them the most efficient choice for transport. He opened his backpack and began filling it methodically, placing each bundle with precision to maximize space. The first layer filled quickly. Michael zipped the lower compartment and began stacking more bundles in the main section of the bag. The process was mechanical, his mind entirely focused on the task. At one point, Michael paused, listening for any sounds from outside the vault. Hearing nothing, he resumed his work. By 9:54 a.m., the backpack was filled to capacity with $2 million in cash. The weight was noticeable but manageable. Michael zipped the bag and took a final look around the vault. He ensured he hadn't left any signs of his presence, then exited the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. This would delay the discovery of the theft, giving him more time to disappear. 9:56 a.m. Michael retraced his steps through the corridor, his movements swift but controlled. He avoided the main hallways, sticking to the paths he had memorized during his earlier visits. Reaching the employee entrance, Michael swiped the duplicate keycard once more. The door unlocked smoothly, and he stepped outside, letting it close gently behind him. Michael walked away from the bank, blending into the mid-morning crowd. He kept his pace steady, resisting the urge to look back. Every step took him further from the scene, yet the adrenaline coursing through his veins made each moment feel like an eternity. At 10:25 a.m., Michael arrived at the garage he had rented under a false name. The space was unremarkable, located in a quiet industrial area. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, placing the backpack on a workbench. Michael unzipped the backpack, revealing the neatly stacked bundles of cash. He counted them carefully, verifying the total. It was all there, $2 million in $100 bills. He removed his gloves and placed them in a plastic bag, along with the duplicate keycard. These items would be burned later to eliminate any evidence. Michael then moved the cash to a secure hiding spot he had prepared, a steel box hidden beneath a false floor panel in the garage. Once the money was secured, Michael sat on a stool, staring at the empty backpack. The weight of what he had just done began to settle in. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before standing and locking the garage door. 11:15 a.m. Michael left the garage, taking a different route back to his apartment. Along the way, he disposed of the gloves, the duplicate keycard, and any other items that could link him to the crime. Each item was carefully placed into separate trash bins located miles apart, ensuring they would never be traced back to him. At one point, Michael paused near a busy park. He casually dropped the plastic bag containing the gloves into a public trash can. The duplicate keycard was placed in another bin near a gas station. He kept walking, blending in with the city's mid-morning activity. By 12:02 p.m., Michael arrived back at his apartment. He locked the door behind him and immediately went to his bedroom, pulling out a fresh set of clothes. He folded the ones he had worn during the heist and placed them into a laundry basket, making a mental note to wash them separately later. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Michael splashed cold water on his face. His reflection stared back at him, calm, composed, but with a hint of tension behind his eyes. He focused on his breathing, forcing himself to relax. By 12:15 p.m., Michael was seated at his kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee and flipping through a newspaper. To any observer, he was a man enjoying a quiet afternoon before starting his next shift. The bus route would serve as his alibi, and Michael intended to play his role flawlessly. 3:30 p.m. Southern Trust Bank's employees discovered the theft during a routine audit. The missing $2 million sparked immediate panic. Managers scrambled to account for the discrepancy, reviewing transaction logs and surveillance footage. The vault door had been left slightly ajar, a detail that both confused and alarmed the staff. Security officers were called in to investigate, and within hours the local police were notified. By 5 p.m. the bank was in chaos. Employees were questioned and the building was temporarily locked down. Surveillance footage showed no clear evidence of an intruder. Michael had timed his movements perfectly, avoiding all cameras and witnesses. 4:15 p.m. Meanwhile, Michael was driving his bus along the same route he had driven for years. Passengers boarded and disembarked, their conversations a hum of background noise. Michael kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. At 6 p.m., Michael returned the bus to the depot and clocked out for the day. He exchanged a few casual words with a coworker about the heat and walked home as if nothing had happened. By 6:45 p.m., Michael was back in his apartment. He reheated a simple dinner, turned on the television, and flipped through channels. The local news hadn't yet picked up the story about the bank robbery, but Michael knew it was only a matter of time. 9 p.m. The television flickered in Michael's dimly lit living room. He sat on the couch, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. The local news anchor reported on the Southern Trust Bank robbery, describing it as a highly calculated theft with no immediate suspects. Michael watched the footage carefully. Police cars were parked outside the bank. Employees were shown leaving the building in small groups, their faces strained. The camera cut to an interview with a bank manager, who spoke about the shock and confusion among the staff. Michael analyzed every word, every image. The phrase, insider knowledge, caught his attention. It confirmed what he had anticipated. The police suspected someone familiar with the bank's operations. This was expected. What mattered was that no one had been named, and no concrete evidence seemed to exist. As the broadcast continued, Michael's gaze shifted to the clock. He calculated how long it had taken for the robbery to be discovered and for the police to respond. This gave him a clearer sense of how much time he had before the investigation intensified. When the news segment ended, Michael turned off the television. The silence in the room felt heavier now, but Michael remained composed. He stood, walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His thoughts returned to the rented garage. The money was secure, hidden beneath layers of precaution. Michael had ensured there were no traces of him left behind at the scene or the garage. By 9:35 p.m., Michael retreated to his bedroom. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day played out in his mind, each detail analyzed for potential errors. Satisfied that everything had gone according to plan, he closed his eyes. For now, he was safe. The days following the robbery were routine. Michael woke at his usual time, dressed for work, and left his apartment as if nothing had happened. He drove his bus, following the same route he had driven for years. Passengers boarded, exchanged pleasantries, and spoke about their lives. Michael listened but said little, as he always did. At the bus depot, his co-workers discussed the robbery. Some joked about an inside job, while others speculated about professional criminals. Michael joined the conversation briefly, offering neutral comments to blend in. His tone was casual, his demeanor unchanged. Each evening, Michael returned home and checked the news. Reports on the robbery continued, but no new information emerged. The police were described as working tirelessly, but Michael noted the lack of concrete leads. Surveillance footage from the bank had revealed no useful evidence. Southern Trust Bank implemented new security measures. Cameras were installed at every entrance, and employees were required to log their movements more strictly. Michael listened as passengers on his bus discussed the changes. He kept his face neutral, offering no reaction. At night, Michael reviewed his actions. He thought about the duplicate keycard, the gloves, and the precise timing of his movements. He replayed every step in his mind, searching for anything he might have overlooked. Each detail reassured him that he had left no trail. As the weeks passed, the robbery became less of a topic of conversation. Michael noticed how quickly people moved on, their lives returning to normal. He followed suit, maintaining his routine and staying out of the spotlight. He knew the key to his success was patience and discipline. 6:03 a.m. Michael Harris woke up to the sound of his alarm. The days following the heist had blended into a routine, but today carried an unusual weight. He understood that the Southern Trust Bank robbery was far from forgotten, and the investigation would eventually narrow in on suspects. Michael turned on the television as he prepared for his day. The morning news revisited the heist, referring to it as one of the most intricate and mysterious crimes Mobile has ever witnessed. Police had few leads and no arrest had been made. The anchor's words reassured Michael. He remained untraceable for now, but the reminder of their ongoing efforts lingered in his thoughts. At 7 a.m., Michael arrived at the bus depot. His co-workers exchanged greetings as usual, but the topic of the heist quickly dominated the room. One of them joked about how the thief must be hiding out on a beach somewhere, sipping cocktails. Michael smiled faintly and laughed along with them, ensuring his reaction was inconspicuous. Throughout his shift, Michael listened carefully to his passengers' conversations. Most of them speculated about professional criminals or an inside job. Some debated whether the thief would ever be caught, while others marveled at the precision of the robbery. Michael remained silent, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. As his shift ended, Michael's relief was overshadowed by the realization that every conversation and every glance from others felt charged with potential suspicion. Still, he reminded himself that his alibi was airtight, and his actions had left no direct trail. 9 July 2015. A week after the heist,